actually an outstanding one. I've been asked to do a kind of serious talk about developments. Today I'll summarise some briefly developments in CF care over the years. I won't deal with issues like aging, we talk about today, or drugs as talk, or actually quality of life, but they are on the agenda later on today. But I will briefly provide an overview of developments in CF care over a number of years. But really, what I want to highlight from my perspective, I think one of the most important developments ever in CF care has been the quality report, and also technology. Well, I see we get this back, and I keep talking and kind of meander my way around. Brief, I'm going to summarize today developments in CF care before POC, what I call the POC years, and then since POC. Because I believe that actually the POC report 2005 is one of the most important developments by any voluntary organisation in Ireland ever, with a huge impact on cystic fibrosis care. Let's see if we can get this going now. Okay. But first of all, I want to just go back a little bit and show the slide, which you'll see today a number of occasions, which is a slide, one of many examples, that summarise the changes in CF over the years. It looks at only one metric. It looks at life expectancy. I want to highlight the gradual progressive improvements in life expectancy in Ireland and internationally over the last 40, 50 years, which have predated the new drugs, and which we expect to improve further with the new drugs. And that's because of multiple incremental changes in care and this organisation over the years. Can you hear me at the back? So going on to the pre-POC report, you've got an outstanding summary today of what happened. And as you were told, the first CF centre in Ireland was set up in Crumlin Hospital in 1969. It was supported and actually driven by cystic fibrosis Ireland through 3 more years. Okay. Then subsequently, Brian Denham set up a centre in Harper Street, John Murphy in Tempest Street, and as Philip summarised, Merge Fitzgerald set up the Vincent CF unit in 1976. It was one of the first adult CF units in these islands or in Europe, and we were one of the first units to have an NDT, a team looking after patients. We go on to Munster, where everything starts in Ireland anyway, indeed, with a number of different CF centres. So I know my audience, and I know my friends. Brendan Watson set up actually the first CF unit in Cork, followed by Cathal Breeden setting up the adult CF unit. Fergus Leahy set up the unit in Kerry. John Cosgrove in Waterford. Yes, John told me that Waterford is part of Munster. And Michael Manning set up the first centre in Limerick. So we had a number of centres that were actually developing on their own over a number of years. We had David O'Kane setting up the Castlebar unit, followed by Michael O'Neill after that, and then Jerry Loftus in Crumlin. So by the time the 90s came, we had a number of different CF centres or CF units throughout Ireland that were set up because of individuals and the association. These units worked together. There were a number of new appointments coming in the 1990s, Peter Greeley, Jerry Canny, Jerry McAvaney, myself, and Leahy. So there was a development of a number of different centres that worked independently but collaborated a lot. And at that stage, and this is mentioned just as an example of what happened, the government in 1997, that year I'll come back to again, said St. Vincent's would be the designated National Cystic Fibrosis Centre, and they'd approved the building of a CF unit in Vincent's in 1997. When it opened, we know it wasn't that year. Over the next number of years throughout Ireland, both in the Munster units, in Galway, in Bones, in Vincent's, in Dublin, different CF teams met with the government, with the hospitals, and said, we need a CF unit. I was involved with those in my own hospital and for other hospitals as well. I made notes after a while, and this was one meeting where I went to with Carl Rainey, who was then the chair of CFI, and we were told, we like what you say, these are the exact words. Those are excellent points. We'll meet in 3 months' time to progress the new CF unit. We walked out of there with a smile at what will happen. So we came back in 3 months. We told them we want to come back in 3 months. What did we hear? We heard again, we like what you say, those are excellent points. We have to meet again in 3 more months to talk about this. So we went on and on. I went rail around that time. For a lazy term. But the important development was that CFI in 2003 decided to have an external review of cystic fibrosis services in Ireland. Very important strategic decision. Also important that they actually decided to have a letter from the UK dude, somebody who had been used by the Irish government to previously assess healthcare services there. So the government couldn't really protest about that. So Dr. Pollock was employed. The CF Scientific Council actually set up the terms of reference of that, and yes, we get general guidelines for how it should be carried out. In 2005, Pollock report was published. That a number of people wandered down to Buzzel's Hotel in Dublin near the Doyle, announced the report, told people about the report, saw a few journalists, saw 1 or 2 politicians who said again to us, we like what you say, we'll meet you in 3 months' time, we'll get a unit or so. We were used to this. But at this stage, we now have this report out there. So what did the report actually say? I highlight a few things on the report. Again, an external assessment, an independent assessor from the UK. And the executive summary is where it's always at. Highlighted the urgent action immediately to correct the dangerous situation in CF centres throughout Ireland. Advocated a small number of dedicated CF centres that were fully staffed and to close smaller CF centres. Said that all beds should be in single rooms. That was that. There should be specific funding for the CF centres. There should be a neonatal screening program. Said that in many locations, physical resources were actually very dangerous, and they castigated my own hospital Vincent's. So over the next period of time, driven by CFI, driven by a number of very important lobbyists, patients and other ones in the families, this hit the media. There was no TV program in Ireland that didn't feature CF over the next 5 to 8 years. A number of people who previously wouldn't return our phone calls, all of a sudden, knew our home numbers, our mobile numbers, would call and say, what do you want? So we had a lot of interest. Some would say, I wouldn't say, of course, we got hot air, but we got an interest. But there were changes. For the next number of years, next 5 to 8 years, there were a number of consultants appointed, both to pediatric CF centres in Cromlin, Tempest Street, Tala, Cork, Galway and Limerick. We also had adult appointments. Vincent Z. McComb came, Cedric came to Lomond, Barry Plant came to Cork, Michael O'Mahony came to Galway, Brian Castaway to Limerick, and Mark Rowan to Waterford. So we definitely had improvements in the staffing of the CF centres, but we did not yet actually have CF units. So we had places where teams worked, patients came, but we had beds. That was an ongoing issue. And we did have improvements, and we had a screening program developed in 2021. It was a hugely important development for CF care, towards strongly by CFI. And there was a very important ongoing campaign by CFI, by the families of patients, by patients themselves, by the CF teams around the country, and by many other supporters as well. And you all know who was involved with that. We're all involved, all of you. Rory was involved, Patricia, Gillian, Orla, Denise Saul, many other people were involved, and their families too, used to it. So I'm going to just give one example of one particular item. This is actually from the Irish Times in 2006, related to a friend of ours who's no longer with us or so, and rather than editorialize, I'm actually taking the exact words from this. This was the front page of the Irish Times reported that a young woman with cystic fibrosis left her hospital bed yesterday to make a personal appeal to the Minister of Health to improve CF service for patients. Denise saw the late marvelous Denise actually confronted the Minister outside the hospital. She told her that this was dangerous, unsafe. And the hospital highlighted she came from her hospital bed with her IV line in her pajamas, and she tested that this was not safe. That hit the media and got vapors for a short while, but for a short while. So the association then launched its own very effective sick waiting campaign. Marvelous term, more power association. So this was actually pushed for a number of years or so, multiple kind of highlights. We support a lot of people. In all the goodwill in the world, that was not enough at that stage. In 2008, the government approved 8 interim beds for St. Vincent's Hospital. It also approved a permanent CF unit. For 2009, the HSE postponed St. Vincent's CF unit. That was a huge downer for all the CF families, for all the CF patients. We had achieved a number of beds in Limerick, some in Cork, some in Galway, one was still waiting, some pediatric hospitals. Then finally, in 2011, after pressure from Phil Watt and CFI, statement was released by the government, signed by Phil Watt, signed by the government, signed by our hospital CEO, by myself, saying there will be a new CF unit. The minister announced it in June, and it was opened, so it was highlighted in August 2012. We're going to go on, jump a little bit on now and actually say what's happened since then, because I want to emphasize Connacht report was a pivotal report. It's what this organization did in those beds to change things. What's happened since then? And briefly, I'm going to summarize, as Philip said, the National Cystic Fibrosis Clinical Program. I'm going to highlight what is it? What does it say? Does it do anything? Anything changed since that time? Well, what is it, first of all? The clinical program is a group, a team of people who work together, come from different backgrounds, to direct government policy on cystic fibrosis care, now and in the future. Yes, it's part of the HSE, but it includes people, as we talked about in a short while, from many different backgrounds. Set up in 2015, we appointed Gary Clean as a program manager, who's been a hugely important part of this, very hard worker. The working group was set up in 2015 with some subgroups initially. We looked around very carefully to see what would work. At that time, there were clinical programs in rheumatology, orthopedics, asthma, emphysema. Some of them were very effective, some of them perhaps not so. I have to be careful what was listed. So I looked around at all of the programs and actually worked out what had worked for them, what had worked out abroad. Discussing with the group very frankly, we decided that we actually wanted this to be a group that would actually make changes, that would make changes in a way that would actually include the government and would actually would be changes afterwards. So this group includes people from a wide variety of backgrounds in CF care. From around Ireland, it was very important that we all knew that no one person had the answer. We had to come into those meetings and listen, and we all learned, and I learned a lot, still learning. Because we actually wanted to work together as a group, it was important that our discussions were confidential until we finished our discussions at our meetings. We would not rediscover the wheel. So yes, we looked at what happens in North America, what happens in Europe, what happens in Australia. We took the best of theirs and we adapted what they did. We agreed that all policies would be agreed by our working group and that the final documents would be approved by the HSE as a whole. So these would become government policy. So we developed documents which we wanted to direct CF care in the long term. We don't have a budget, but we wanted to actually set out how it would be organized. And we wanted that to become government policy. Just what we're trying to do. Not always well, but we're trying to. We asked for nominees for a number of different groups, from actually the different CF centers that you can see here, from the different CF clinical groups, from the CF nurses, dietitians, physiotherapists, psychologists, pharmacists, microbiologists, with 2 nominees from Cystic Fibrosis Ireland. Philip Watt has been there from the start. 2 nominees from the Cystic Fibrosis Registry as well. And yes, also HSE senior management. They were involved in this, supporting a list of people there. So I want to thank them all for their work over that time. So what does it do? Okay, that's who's there, that's the philosophy. We all know over the years that there will be many government initiatives that have actually been launched with bright lights, balloons, flags, that have resulted in actually not as much as we might want to. We wanted to try and avoid that. So our first priority was to actually write a number of documents that would set out how we would organize CF Care long term. These are the models of care. So what were the goals of the models of care? We want to outline how CF Care would be organized now in the future throughout Ireland. It would be a national model. This was not Dublin-centric, Cork-centric, Galway-centric, Limerick-centric. It was everywhere. Thank you. It had to be for Ireland. We became aware very quickly during the Pollock report that people made comparisons with Canada, the States, Europe, and the rest. So we wrote a document for the Irish population. Why? Because Ireland has the most severe CF in the world. We have one of the most highest rates of CF in the world. So we wrote a document that was focused on that. And it had to be future-proof. It would not be for 2015 or 2025. It had to expand as the population changed, the number of adults changed, as children changed. So that was the intention. And for those of you who like these diagrams, I don't. Yes, we went through a long process of consultation. Subgroups wrote this, we had consultation within the working group, outside the working group. We allowed external consultation abroad as well. And yes, we went through these block diagrams. It was launched in 2019. Actually, it was launched by the Minister of Health at the time, Simon Harris. It was launched as government policy, and that's the key thing I said before. You see here, actually, at the launch as well, launched by Dr. Colin Henry, the HSE Chief Clinical Officer. It was launched by Phil Watt, and also it was launched by the Tinsley as well. So this was launched as official government policy at that stage. But what does it say? Okay. Yes, I have almost memorized and I'm not finding those there. The model is about the care of people with cystic fibrosis and their families. It's also about actually the CF teams and organization. That's what it's all about. It says specifically that cystic fibrosis care has to be delivered in a small number of dedicated CF centres that are fully resourced. But all CF centres have to have at least 50 patients. You have to have the expertise to deliver the care for them. Centres less than that would not be CF centres, but in paediatrics, they could function shared care centres. We have specific recommendations on the staffing of these centres, the resources needed for these centres. And yes, rather than dealing with the numbers right then, we developed, it took months and months to develop. We developed the ratios of staff needed per number of patients for adult units, pediatric units. So that, for example, if you have 50 patients, you have to have a certain number of nurses, psychologists, everything else. And we use that. We go in and talk to the line, to actually HSC, to government, we bring the people there. That's government policy. It makes a really interesting conversation. It highlighted also the crucial importance of infection control. People with cystic fibrosis are uniquely subject to infections from each other, from other people. So we highlighted that all CF centres have single rooms. All inpatient beds have to be in single rooms. We highlighted the crucial importance of CF consultants, that all CF units have to have more than one CF consultant. You can't have only one each, since we have it. And they also said we have to have a model care for cystic fibrosis and transplantation. This was launched actually last year. Go through very briefly, and this model care highlights the 7 important steps of transplantation, of which the 6th is the transplant operation, the 7th is follow-up care. Crucially highlights the whole process of consideration, assessment, referral, decisions regarding transplant. But it highlights that transplantation is a part of CF care. We have to have the totality of CF care. We have to prepare people for transplant assessment. We have to have a particular psychological tools for that from the start. So transplantation, yes, it's less important than 10, 20 years ago. It's still important. We focus on all of that. We focus on specific recommendations for referral, assessment, listing for transplant, the whole process of post-transplant care. We've highlighted that cystic fibrosis after transplant, majority of mortality and morbidity and health problems are due to post-transplant issues, but there are still some CF issues. We've highlighted a model by which those people with CF who've had a transplant were living in Leinster would have their transplant care in the Mater Hospital and their CF care in the Mater Hospital. Those people who are living outside Leinster will have their transplant care jointly from their local CF centre in the Mater Hospital and the CF care from the local centre. So all of these models I've highlighted, we need resources. That we have to have the beds for people with cystic fibrosis. We have to have the adequate number of CF team members and consultants in all the units throughout Ireland. We've highlighted in particular the need for a national CF psychology service. It's been a big focus of all of us in the last year. We've highlighted the essential need for dedicated inpatient beds for pediatric care and for adult care. And that's still very important. We're hearing now on a monthly basis that we now have these new drugs, we don't need these beds. My answer is no, we need them more. People are living longer. CF is more complex. We want these beds. We need these beds. Now I would say that's in your model of care. This is the government model of care. We're not changing that. I'm not changing. We also actually focus on the resourcing of post-transplant care at the Mater Hospital, Cork, Galway, Limerick, CF centres. Okay, those are documents. What has changed? This is a talking shop where we meet and talk about documents. What has anything changed? As I mentioned, our first model was in 2019, very end of 2019. What happened since then? We all know that COVID came along, destroyed so many different things, destroyed lives, caused healthcare problems. And I do want to acknowledge the loss of many people due to COVID, and also Ron's loss, and the work that Philip did despite all the COVID time. And that's very important. Because this time period changed everything. But over that time period, we focused on a number of COVID issues. Some of you may know, at that time around Ireland, all the hospitals changed. There was a change in how they used beds, how they used outpatients. There was a huge push when it happened for many specialties to actually reconfigure inpatient beds for COVID only. That was a big issue. So we, supported by CFI, pushed strongly against this. Made certain that government policies stipulated that inpatient beds had to be protected for CF throughout COVID. That came up again and again and again in hospital CFs. We also highlighted that CF healthcare would not disappear during COVID, it might become greater. So we focus on all of that. I really can't see at this stage. Other developments, the last 2 years, we've had 7 new CF consultant posts approved. 5 of them have been filled so far. We've had a major push to fill CF team members posts throughout the country. We need an adequate number of dietitians, nurses, physiologists, psychologists, pharmacists, social workers, all of those things, physiotherapists. focusing on dealing with the COVID-related CF healthcare issues. And I'm not going to go into this, but I'll just highlight the crucial importance of the organization's work in having approval for the 35 children with cystic fibrosis as well. Took too long to come either there. That's an important topic. What about the future? For this year, one of our big focuses that we want a national CF psychology service. Do we have it yet? Not yet. We want to have CF psychologists in every pediatric and adult CF centre in Ireland. We're talking here about psychologists with particular training in CF psychology. Not people who are doing CF and rheumatology and dementia and things. We want people in every pediatric CF centre and every adult CF centre with an interest in CF psychology. We want an adequate number of CF team members. We want intend to resourcing of post-transplant care in the Mater, yes, but also in the other centres we're looking at in Cork and Galway in particular. So the future, what's happening, these we discussed today. Some of the major current and evolving issues of cystic fibrosis, the whole complex issue highlighted in the video before, of fertility and pregnancy in CF. We now, thankfully, have a large number of people with CF who are parents and or grandparents. That becomes more complex though with the new drugs. It becomes more complex with a lot of other things. The new CF drugs are a huge improvement. Ed McCall will summarise them in a short while. They've had major developments, but we have to highlight the fact that, at least at this stage, they're not a cure. They don't remove the need for ongoing CF resourcing. We have to deal with the new evolving CF complications. We have to deal with, again as topic today, CF and aging. Okay. I tell you, our geriatricians for the last 10 years, I want to be a geriatrician in Vincent's Hospital with an interest in cystic fibrosis. It's not there yet, but it will come. And in Cork and Galway. We will relook at the whole issue of CF diagnosis in a small number of cases. The vast majority of people are diagnosed now with newborn screening, not all are. In CF, we have to manage, as always, the unexpected. The problems of CF now were not present or were few 10, 20 years ago. There will be new issues. We've seen new drugs with new side effects. So CF changes, but also as it changes, and this is the topic for today, the whole psychological aspects of cystic fibrosis change for those with cystic fibrosis and their families, and that's keeping changing. So this is a moving target. So the idea of some in the media, that CF is cured, it's not cured. It's improving, we need more resource. And another big challenge is retaining CF team members. It's an issue around the world. It's going to be a big issue in Ireland now. To recruit and retain CF team members who will have a dedication for CF care long term. And that will be one of the big challenges we have in the next few years. But remember, our underlying goal is, and I'm not taking away from your talk, Alexandra, the goal here is to maximize the quality of life, not just the people with cystic fibrosis and their families. And with that, and that's important, but here's the other thing, we want to minimize the effects of the disease itself and the treatment of quality of life. Quality is crucially important here. So I want to finish by thanking, first of all, most of all, the CF working group, who worked so hard to develop these documents, who come together as a collective. This is a team sport to develop this. And Philip for his work on that, the association for its support, setting up the clinical program. Probably worth mentioning in passing that for all other lung diseases, including asthma, emphysema, lung fibrosis, rare lung diseases, there is one overall clinical program that encompasses a population of probably 700,000 people. We have to date retained a clinical program for cystic fibrosis. So that's thanks to the support of all of you. I want to thank the CF teams around the country. This is an example of one team here. Essentially, it's a Dublin and a Cork bias. This is our own CF team members a few years ago. And yes, they were smiling because they had cones in the picture with them. That's part of the reason. They were also smiling because one of our team members at that time was leaving, and he was going to actually focus on his activities in rowing with his brother, per se. And he was a Cork man who's now since become famous. So I want to thank that. But most of all, this work, this presentation, is focused on people with cystic fibrosis and your families who deal with cystic fibrosis every day of their lives. So it's a focus on those who are no longer with us. You will not be forgotten. Thank you very much.